Welcome to HogvilleNET YouTube Live on this very early Monday morning. I'm Kevin McPherson. I'm your host. So good morning to everyone, those brave to join in. It felt like, for the longest time, it has felt like that John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball program has kind of zeroed in on the class of 2026 guys. They've prioritized a certain group of players. Really, you could go back to May and beyond that, the same names we've been talking about going back to the first live eval sessions, and even before that, when we start tracking Calipari's track record with some of these players, whether it's going to their campus, different signs where offers were made, when contact was made, going back over a year, and we've kind of delved into the fact that Arkansas, the priority guys, weren't just kind of new kids on the street in terms of late getting in on. In the era of NIL, what value is it in terms of building that long-term relationship? For some programs, that's still important. For John Calipari and his coaching staff, he talks about it. He's talked about it recently. It's still a very important thing. NIL, Arkansas can be competitive there, but the idea is that Arkansas is going to have a stopping point with everybody. They want it to be more about the value of coming to play for Cal, his track record, getting guys developed, getting them to the next level. You know the drill. And so the same names, we've talked about it over and over again, where Calipari is courtside. You expect him to be there every time for J.J. Andrews. You expect him to be there every time for guys like Jordan Smith Jr., Brandon McCoy Jr., who got back on the circuit after missing the spring here in July, and Calipari was there basically, or someone on the Arkansas staff in some combination there for every game in these two July live eval periods. Of course, Chuck Martin was in Switzerland when McCoy kind of made his debut at the World Cup, along with other Arkansas targets like Tyron Stokes, another player that the staff has really been focused on. When you looked over at the Adidas circuit, some combination of the coaching staff and including John Calipari focusing on guys like Tay Kenny and Arafan Diane, the big man we talk a lot about, Abdu Torre, the big guard wing out of Connecticut, Mika Miernan. You haven't had courtside presence this spring and summer for him because he hasn't played, but he's been someone that's been pursued and recruited by Arkansas and this coaching staff for well over a year. We know he took a visit last September. Another guy from the Adidas circuit, Caleb Holt. If you went back to September of last year when the live recruiting period opened up, Calipari was on the road to see a lot of these players, so in person on their campuses. So we're going to continue to talk about these players coming out of this final July live eval period. And I'm at a place now where I said during one of my recent segments, I said, we're going to really start hearing more news once the play wraps up on these circuits of players scheduling visits. And we've talked a little bit about at least a couple that visits are planned for now, and then we see what happens, and those are fall visits. So we're going to continue to stay on the path of each of these players, those names I just went through, and track what they're doing and what Calipari and the staff's doing with them. And today I'm actually going to give an odds, a one out of 10 kind of look at it on this in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are Arkansas's chances to land each one of these players. So we're going to do that. We're going to get to that secondly, because I set this up today to really focus on, Calipari has a pretty consistent pattern of recruiting players for the long haul and over time, even if it's a short and brief one and done experience with them. You're putting in sometimes more than that 1 year that they're going to spend with you. And it's actually just a few months because it's just basketball season. So it's interesting how high school recruiting works. But sometimes Calipari comes in on a player a little bit late, and that's what happened. He was on one of the Nike Peach Jam telecasts. He was interviewed, I think, at halftime of one of those, and he was talking about 2 or 3 different things. And one of the things he says, sometimes when we come and come out for evals, we see something new, or there's something else that gets on our radar. Paraphrasing there, so effectively talking about what played out with a Sunday night, just last night, sometime before 9 p.m. Central Time. So it wasn't early in the evening. It was actually when this was announced by the player. But Cole Clower, Cloer, Cole Clower, a 6'7", 6'8", small forward wing, so a big wing, a shooter. This guy is a shooter. He is not bashful about taking threes. Something we've talked so much about, Calipari, the staff identifying a shooter. Well, here's a shooter in Cole Clower that's really talked about over the weekend in an interview I saw. He was quoted talking about the 8 teams he's kind of down to. There are 8 teams that have really focused in on him, and some of that recruitment's been going on for a while. And here comes Arkansas with an offer. And so the idea is, well, Calipari must have just kind of stumbled onto this guy. This is, again, sort of a late move when you look at his track record and how he kind of, his modus operandi, MO, how he kind of recruits guys. But you'll see examples of this. Last May, it was a guy like Will Riley, who was a 6'7", 6'8" perimeter player, right? A volume 3-point shooter that could do other things. Calipari kind of got in on that late. He was still new to the job at Arkansas as well. And then Riley ends up as a one and done over at Illinois. But this is the next best example of that kind of guy. When you talk about the size, what he brings to the table in terms of that arsenal, perimeter guy, but can do more than just shoot threes. But Cole Clower has had some big moments, and Calipari's been courtside for some of that. So some of that happened. So he announces the offer last night. I retweeted that. And some of the courtside stuff with Calipari, watching this player with Team CP3, by the way, Chris Paul's outfit, that's on the Nike EYBL. Some of it was in the last couple of days, in this second live eval of July and the final one when Calipari was courtside. But this actually goes back to the previous weekend. If you remember, Nike EYBL had during both live eval sessions, back-to-back weekends, 4-day sessions for coaches to be out. So they had a 4-day window to watch. And Cole Clower and Team CP3 matched up against J.J. Andrews and Brad Bill Elite. That happened last Saturday. So a week ago Saturday, when Calipari was courtside to see JJ, he also got to see Cole. And that was just one of the games where Cole Clower went off. He had 21 points in a win. Team CP3 beat Brad Bill. Close game, but a 21-point game, and he was 5 of 10 from 3. So Calipari had actually seen him prior to this weekend. It just wasn't talked about because everybody knew that Calipari was courtside for every one of J.J. Andrews' games. Of course, he's going to see other players. So that's where, I'm not going to say that's where the seed was embedded for Calipari pursuing this player, because Calipari also watched him play. I know he saw him play at least twice back in May at the live eval in Memphis when I was there. And remember, there were I said there were a group, at least a handful of players. After we went through a ton of names over about 3 or 4 episodes coming out of that weekend, I said there's at least a handful of players that kind of remain anonymous right now, and we'll see if anything picks up with those players where that'll come to the forefront. The staff kind of wanted to keep some of that on the down low at the time. And I just kind of took my mind off of Cole Clower and some other players that Calipari, I noticed, had been at least at courtside for a couple of their games, emerging players. But Cole Clower, he's a North Carolina guy, again, plays for Team CP3, and that's his home state, has moved and transferred to IMG Academy for this upcoming season, which will be his senior season. Again, 6'7", 6'8", North Carolina State, Louisville, Alabama, UConn, Florida, Indiana, and Virginia. Those are the 8 schools, and he had a lot to say about each one of them when interviewed by Sam Lance with Zag's blog. Sam does a good job as a national recruiting analyst, identifying the top recruits, and then getting them on the record with the teams that are involved with them. But when you look at Cole Clower, let's just look at him through both parts of the EYBL. The first main part, which was the session play, and then the last and then once you got into the Peach Jam part of it, what he did there when we talk about shooting. First of all, he averaged 15.3 points and nearly 5 rebounds per game through the Peach Jam, 6 games total. When you break that down shooting wise, this is why we talk about him as a perimeter threat. 33 of 94 overall from 3. That's 35.1%. but that was in the 14 EYBL games when you looked at session play. So that's good. That's nearly six. That's nearly, excuse me, nearly 7 3-point attempts per game. Um, let's go. Let's in 14 games. Um, you know, mid to 6.5 to 7 attempts per game at 35.1%. That's really good. This is a guy again. If you're courtside in some of the games where he's really going off, like Calipari was against JJ and Brad Bill Elite the previous weekend, it kind of reinforces what you saw back in May. I think one of the games that Calipari was courtside for CP3 back in May, if I'm not mistaken, Clower had like a made triple game. So when Calipari's been there to see him, he's kind of gone off. But again, 33 of 94 and 14 EYBL games in the session play. And then when you looked at his 6 games through the Peach Jam, it kind of tapered off a little bit. Um, his 3-point attempts per game, not vastly different, but just under 6 per game in terms of attempts. He was 11 of 35, so down to 31.4%. But a lot of that's when the coach, what coaches see and what they see in you. They may not just be concerned about the full percentage there, because the guy has big games shooting from three, and you look at the volume, so he's not bashful about it. So this has not been an elite percentage-wise guy. When you look at this Nike session, when you combine, when you start with just singling out the session play, 35% is good at that volume. A little less, again, closer to 31% in the Peach Jam competition, but still a very high volume kind of guy. But I think for Calipari, the games again he was courtside. CP3 had a huge lead in the quarterfinals in Nike Peach Jam a couple of days ago. With Calipari was there, and this guy started great. He had like 16 points, I think, by halftime or early third quarter. He has big halves. I think he had a 29-point game in one half when Dan Hurley and UConn, who's one of the teams in his Final Eight, and prioritizing him when they were courtside to watch him. But he had a big half in CP3's eventual loss to Team Why Not. That was the team that moved on to the semifinals after coming back from like 18 down. Clower had a big early part of that game. Things kind of slowed down for him and his teammates as Why Not made that big comeback, ended up winning that game, and again moved to the semis, where they would lose to J.J. Andrews and Brad Bill Elite, Team Why Not, on those 2 made free throws by J.J. with 20 seconds left to flip a 1-point deficit to a 1-point win. But it very easily could have been Team CP3 there, and we would have seen J.J. match up with another big wing again in Cole Clower. But toward the end of that game, I remember Team CP3 was trying to run some plays through him, get him the ball, to get that. They just went through a big drought, and there was a huge run for Team Why Not. And Clower, I remember 2 or 3 plays. I wasn't sure if it was fatigue, but he looked a little bit slow, and so they ran some good stuff for him. But by the time he got in his shot mechanic, there were defenders kind of draped all over him, and so he might have gotten one clean look there toward the end on a shot that didn't just go for him. That was a game that went down to the wire, as would the next game for Team Why Not after winning that one and putting Clower out of the event. But again, Calipari, courtside to see him several times when he was making shots. I think in that particular game against Team Why Not, he finished with those 16 points, but he was 4 of 6 from 3. When you look at his 6 games in Peach Jam, he only had 2 efficient shooting games from 3. The other 4, not so much. But again, repeating myself one more time, a lot of times it's when you're seen that has a stick-to-itiveness. This is a player that's ranked top 25 nationally. So he's on that verge of 5-star status. He's got a shot at being a McDonald's All-American. And again, when you look at 6'7", 6'8" shooter, and he's got good size, and if you run him off the 3 line, he does a really good job of putting the ball on the deck. Very competent ball handler. He's got he definitely has some counter moves. He's got a really nice use of his pivot foot, a la Dirk Nowitzki. I'll compare him to out on the mid range, where he plants that pivot and changes direction. So he'll reverse his position off that pivot. and then fade away with a jump shot. And he's got that length and height. So if you are draped all over him, he's not going to shake you with a ton of explosiveness or quickness, but he's very effective, and he can finish well above the rim as well. My NBA comp, my player comparison is probably Duncan Robinson. 6'7", about the same size. Duncan Robinson at this stage wasn't nearly as good, right? He was a Division II player, has been turned into a really good NBA player. You think about the work he's had done with the Miami Heat in his career, but similar. Duncan's a sniper, but then if you run him off the three line, he can maneuver and manage inside that arc, including getting all the way to the basket. Not a bad athlete. And again, when you're 6'7", 6'8", that helps if you can handle the ball a little bit and have a little shooting skill. So Colt Clower is a nice player. Cal getting in late, as good a recruiter and great a recruiter as Calipari's been with some of these other schools, some of the teams in his backyard. We'll see where this goes, but it tells me a few things. One is, whereas Calipari has been, settled on a 3-player class each of his first 2 recruiting cycles at Arkansas, 3 players from the high school level that are coveted players each. We've said we think he might go with 4 this time. And it would not shock me if he got the right group to go 5. And part of the reason is when I look at his retention, the retention he brought with him from Kentucky to Arkansas in year 1, the retention on the current roster from last season, big time impact guys. And I don't know with this group, after having only a Duthero that you lost to the NBA draft, I guess in the sense that was the same with Boogie Flan, 2 players, and he ends up coming back to college, but moved on to Florida. I think you could be losing more than 2, and as many as 4, if not more than that, in terms of just leaving early for the draft or some pro opportunity. In addition to guys, they're going to cycle off the roster because of their eligibility being out. So I don't know what kind of retention you're going to have other than the back end development guys, and we can't count those guys as reliable retention in terms of they're going to come back and really impact what you're doing the next season and what you're building and what you're going to put on the court consistently. So if that's the case, you've got to build it somehow when you're looking at your top 8 or 9. And then you get into talking about, well, how are you going to do that? Some combination of more than just 2 out of the portal? Do you double that up? You get more out of the high school ranks, which seems to me, even though Calipari says he's got to get older and can't afford to have half his roster be high school guys, I mean, you might stretch it a little bit depending upon what you think might happen with your group of guys that might be moving on after this year. So there's more than one way to look at it, more than one way to get it done to build a roster, and we'll see if he leans more in this cycle in high school or not. But jumping in on another player now could also signify that Arkansas's maybe moved on or they're out of the picture for some of the typical names that they've been pursuing. The only thing there is throughout the weekend, the same weekend that you're seeing a guy like Colt Clower and getting to a point where you want to offer him, you're still prioritizing all the same guys, the names we just went through. So we'll see what happens with Colt Clower. Let's talk about some of these other players now. As we wait to hear more news about visits, and is Arkansas and player Brand X moving further away from each other? Or are they coming closer together and getting ready to take the next step and get some of these guys on campus? We know J.J. Andrews took his visit back in December, committed to Arkansas in May, and now we're in the scale of 1 to 10. What is Arkansas's chances of landing each one of these guys that they've really been drilled down on? So let's start with J.J. Andrews. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 9-point infinite 9999, dragging it all the way out. You guys know I don't like to be absolute about anything. The ink's not dry. He can't sign until November. I see 0 problems with this being a great marriage. And you look at the weekend JJ just had, the best player in the country right now, right? The Nike Peach Jam, the capping off the Nike EYBL season, that is the top of all the shoe circuits. Is the highest quality of competition when you look at it top to bottom. We celebrated him over the weekend, getting that MVP, winning that second consecutive Peach Jam title, 16U last year, 17U. Go check out those segments. I had several through the weekend on J.J. Andrews if you hadn't already seen them. And if you just want to stroll back down memory lane, treat yourself to some J.J. stats and things that he did, and some of the process with the staff recruiting him, and eventually prioritizing him once they took the job and once they moved it down the road a little bit. But JJ, I've got 9.999. on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of my confidence. This is my confidence level that he'll end up being a Razorback. So you effectively can call it a 10. Again, if I'm going to maintain my record of no absolutes, I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to go in order of how I have these on the scale, descending. So we started with the highest level of confidence. The next two are at the same spot here. I've got Arafan Diane, the 7'1", 280-pound center at Iowa United Prep. We've gone through a ton of intel explaining where Arkansas, going back months. This is not anything new. And it really, when we talk about the timeline, it's even older than the last couple of months when we started looking at these live evals, because Calipari was on his campus at Iowa United Prep last year. Offered him back in July of last year. So, it's been a year, it's been at least a year that Arkansas has really been pursuing this player. But I've got my confidence level at a 6 out of 10. Part of that's because of the pursuit, the fact that Arkansas Calipari courtside for nearly every one of his games this weekend on the Made Hoops circuit, shifted over from Adidas and played at Made Hoops. They had multiple circuits around the country. One of those was in Augusta, Georgia, right there in the backyard of Nike Peach Jam. So Calipari and associate head coach Kenny Payne, I think, was courtside for all of his games. Calipari all but one. And Arkansas continued to prioritize, but also the fact that the player told me back in May that he was going to take a visit to Arkansas in September. I've been speaking with his guardian, who has Arkansas now on a tentative schedule date for the last weekend in August, when the football team opens up its season at home against Alabama A&M. So the plan for now, tentative date scheduled for that last August weekend. And then so we'll see where it goes. UConn, Kentucky with a recent offer. Last night it came out that Eric Patrick Melsman, his USC Trojans, offered Arafan Diane a lot of high majors, trying to get in the mix here with him. But really, you think of UConn. UConn's a team I keep hearing is really making a push for him. But Arkansas, the way Calipari's playing this, and the presence that he and that staff have had, I think Arkansas is got as good a shot as anybody to get this young man. And so, we're still, it's just next month. I mean, effectively a month from now when he's expected to be on campus. Visit dates change; those things happen, so we'll keep our eye on it. But for now, we're a 6 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 in confidence level for Arafan Diane. I have the same confidence level. I'm a 6 out of 10 for Abdou Toure, the 6'5", 6'6" wing at a West Haven, Connecticut, Notre Dame High School there. Another UConn priority guy. Louisville, Pat Kelsey. Oregon's another school in the mix there. But Arkansas, and he took that unofficial visit to Arkansas back in October, the weekend of the LSU game. Chris Sinak Jr. was on an official visit. And you had Abdou Toure on campus. But remember, we've reported and given you intel along the way about all the different times that Arkansas has staff members courtside during live eval opportunities. They don't miss a thing. He was at MBPA Top 100 camp at the same time as J.J. Andrews and Arafan Diane, the same MBPA Top 100 camp back in June. Oh, by the way, those guys played on the same team in that event. And the guardian for Diane mentioned to me, brought it up without me asking, about the chemistry between JJ and Arafan Diane. But remember, Arkansas's entire coaching staff was on site for that event. And Calipari saw all three of these guys together. And it's an interesting thing. We've got JJ as on the highest level of confidence, as high as you're going to get with me at nearly 10 out of 10. And the next two highest on the board are guys that were all in the same room together on the same team for an event. But it wasn't just an idea that was sparked at that moment. Again, you go back in time and look at how for beyond a year now, Arkansas and Calipari have been pursuing these guys heavily. So that's why we're at where we are, 6 out of 10 for both, on a scale of 1 to 10 for both Arafan Diane and Abdou Toure. Toure is inside the top 30 in most of the services. I have him ranked as the 20th best player in the country. I just put out my top 25 over the weekend. But, a guy that can really go off and have big offensive games, but does a little bit of everything. Just a really wonderful talent, and I understand why Calipari is fixated on him. Jordan Smith Jr., we brought you intel on him. He has spoken publicly that he wants to schedule a visit with Arkansas sometime after Peach Jam. Well, here we are. We're going to be on Jordan Smith Jr. watch in terms of a visit to Arkansas. There's this idea that it may be down, depending upon who you talk to, down to Arkansas, Duke, and Georgetown. And I've had three different sources I brought you information on with that. Each one was a little bit different. One that thought Arkansas had real momentum, and if it wasn't Arkansas in the lead, the source didn't know who would be. Another one that thinks it's going to be Georgetown. And then you hear plenty of smoke for Duke. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I've got my confidence factor right in the middle, right now at 5. It's a combination of the fact that he has publicly articulated he wants to visit Arkansas. And then as each of these sources that I talked to, with each one, you don't, Arkansas is not excluded in that top 2 or top 3 pecking order. And it's John Calipari. So if he gets him, if we ever, once we hear it's a visit date scheduled, I might move my confidence level up a notch or more, depends on what else I hear in the background, with Jordan Smith Jr. The longer this goes where we don't hear about a visit date and we hear maybe other things, it might indicate something different. Jordan Smith Jr., I've got him ranked as the second best player in the class of 2026. Many services do. Obviously, a 5-star 6'2" guard out of the state of Virginia. Just a wonderful player throughout. He was the MVP of Nike EYBL session play in May. He was the best defensive player, named that in the FIBA U19 World Cup. The only 2026 player that started every game for Team USA, and then just continued to show out and show off with Calipari courtside, averaging over 20 points per game. We talk about what a great defender he is, but he can score. He can do a lot of things. But Jordan Smith Jr., a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. I've got Brandon McCoy Jr., who didn't play in the spring. He did show up and play part of the 4 players that were invited to Team USA in that U19 FIBA World Cup over in Switzerland. Out of the 4 guys, out of those 4 players from that class, he played the least amount. He's been dealing with injuries, but he came back to the circuit for these last 2 live eval periods last weekend and the previous weekend, and then this just the one that just ended, and put up some really good numbers, big games. Calipari courtside for just about every time he played. Had a 38-point game, 8-rebound game as one of his big performances, but consistently played well. Big-time slasher at 6'5", St. John Bosco out of Los Angeles. Has an opportunity to be a plus defender, really big-time athlete. Perimeter shooting, not so much, but, he's developing. But I've got him on a scale of 1 to 10. I've got him at a 4 right now, only because there's just not been a lot of talk in terms of him in visits. In Arkansas, the fact that Calipari is dialed in makes me think he knows something we don't. But until I hear a little bit more about, he plans to visit Arkansas and what in a time frame that might look like, right now I have it at a 4. My confidence level is just below. You got a 50-50 shot at getting this guy. I'm not quite there yet. Tyron Stokes, who also has verbalized and articulated back in May, it was back in May, that Arkansas would be one of the schools he wanted to visit. You haven't heard that much, other than a lot of your national recruiting analysts not being able to get him on the record, just still riding with that, thinking, okay, Arkansas is probably in it. He's visited the hometown school Louisville last year, Kansas back in May, Kentucky in June, and then folks are then thinking naturally, well, Arkansas must be next. But his mom was on the record over the weekend during one of those NBA TV live streams talking about the 3 schools, which are 3 that we mentioned the segment before. She actually, I think the same morning, I came on early, and then it was later that day, she was live on that interview talking about USC, Oregon, and Gonzaga as 3 schools that might get a visit. No mention of Arkansas. We said that doesn't necessarily mean that Arkansas is out of it, but because of that, I have knocked my Stokes confidence level down to a 2. Down to a 2 for now in terms of, is there a pathway for this to Arkansas? Because even if he visited, I still gave Arkansas maybe with Calipari, maybe he's got a little bit advantage over some of the other, over maybe 1 or 2 of the other 3 he had already visited. But now that you're hearing 3 other school names in Arkansas not mentioned, it just bumps it down a little bit even more for me. I was probably going to be, if I thought that Arkansas was mentioned as one of the schools he would visit, I'd probably be around a 5. But no mention right now, and 3 other schools mentioned, that lowers it down a little bit. So we'll see. It's getting late in terms of these talking points. If he's going to drag it out until the spring of next year, it's not that late in terms of a decision. So we'll see what happens with Stokes. These are all subject to change based on new information coming in. Tay Kenny coming to visit Arkansas. Kentucky kid, plays at Overtime Elite. Calipari's been recruiting him for a very long time. The first offer in that class of 2026 that Calipari made upon taking the Arkansas job. I've got Kenny as a 5 on my scale of 1 to 10, mainly because he's taken a ton of other visits. He's already taken a couple, but he's going to take several. Arkansas, the way they're scheduled now, gets the last visit. That's September 26th through 28th. Football team hosting Notre Dame that day. So that's where I have the range for that one. Just kind of middle of the road because he's an Adidas kid, Louisville home state school. People think he's maybe a lean. Some think he's more than a lean for Louisville, just going to take visits. But I think if you're that strong with Louisville at this stage, why would you have so many scheduled and lined up? We see players sometimes do that, and then they don't take all of them. So we'll see where that goes. So the fact that Calipari's been recruiting him when he was in the same state as the head coach of the Wildcats, and then the Overtime Elite part of it. Calipari's pulled a player out of there. It seems like at least the last 3 years in his last 3 recruiting cycles. So, getting him on campus and getting the last visit could mean something, or it may never happen, or it may happen and it doesn't mean a whole lot. We'll see, but I'm not quite there yet to have more confidence and take any. The 6'2", 5-star guard I've got ranked as the 12th best player in the country. He usually ranges, if you look at the various services, 11 through 17. I've got him at the 12th best. Had a big 36-point game in his final game ever yesterday at Adidas 3SSB out in California. Chuck Martin was out there courtside for, I assume, all of Kenny's games and got to catch Abdou Toure. He played briefly early on in the weekend. But Kenny went off the right way, right? A 36-point game for the 6'2" lead guard who's athletic. Mika Murnin, I know that Arkansas staff continues to prioritize him. They continue to recruit him. But at some point, when you look at a guy like Cole Clower, who's mostly a big wing, but could play some 3-4, you wonder, is Arkansas shifting? Are they shifting gears? Are they trying to have a backup for that kind of spot? The last the staff talked to me just over a week ago was they're still in it for him, for Mika Murnin in class of 26, even though they're not courtside for anything for him because he hasn't played spring and summer. So right now, hearing things like North Carolina might be in the lead, hearing that, some think maybe Michigan, he's down to a Final 7. We brought you intel the other day, one of the Kentucky beat writers thinks that he's off, that Kentucky's out of it, no longer in the mix for him. So we'll see what, where truth is, where does it lie? Kentucky is going to get a visit from Christian Collins, another combo forward, a guy that can potentially stretch the floor. Not the strongest performances consistently as of late, and has dropped down my board. I've got him in a tie with Mika Murnin right now in terms of where they're ranked as prospects. So maybe Kentucky moving on to Collins. But where is Arkansas with Mika right now, especially again with this interest all of a sudden in Cole Clower? Doesn't mean that you're not just casting a bit of a wider net and your interest level in Mika stays the same. But for me right now, the fact that he's already been on campus, he's taken a visit, but he's down to a Final 7 and maybe a 6 if Kentucky's really out. And you're hearing different teams, not Arkansas right now, from some of the folks, but the staff has enough confidence that they're sticking with it. I'm going to go middle of the road again. I'm going to go a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 in my confidence level that Mika Murnin becomes an Arkansas Razorback. There's reasons to think it could be good. He liked Arkansas's visit more than the other ones he took back in September. I mean, that's something, right? He had a very favorable experience, and he was comparing it to other visits. It wasn't like it was his only visit, and that's, yeah, it's great, First time you ride a Ferris wheel, it's awesome, right? And then don't want to do it again necessarily after you've done it the second time. All right, so the last one I'm going to throw on here, Caleb Holt. I've got him in a tie for the second best prospect in the country. I've got him and Jordan Smith Jr. step for step with each other. The 6'4" combo guard out of the Atlanta area. He's Kansas, Kentucky in pursuit of him, Alabama, Auburn. He talked to me back in May about wanting to visit Arkansas. Arkansas continued to prioritize him when they were at FIBA U19 FIBA U19 World Cup. The staff told me the 426 guys, they are locked in with all of them in terms of still actively recruiting them. and that was just a few weeks ago. So, but you continue to hear other names with Caleb Holt, not really Arkansas, and having some of those behind the scenes conversation. Arkansas doesn't really come up. So just based on that, I've got him similar to Caleb Stokes. I've got him down as a 2 on the confidence level. All right, 35 minutes in. That's going to do it. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We've moved through a lot of names. Cole Clower could also be Arkansas's. Spent a lot of time courtside for Jalen Montnati, the 6'7" wing out of Owasso, Oklahoma. We didn't really give a confidence rating for him today. We'll talk more about him maybe another time. But let's keep our eyes on the Cole Clower situation. If something breaks, something important, if we get the full schedule, or if we, something with a visit date with one of these top priority guys pops today, which we're going to start seeing some of this stuff come out. If that's the case, and I'm jumping back on. If not, thanks for being here. Take care of yourselves. Appreciate all of you. See you soon.